Hello everybody, I'm Daniele Fontani. I'm here to speak about an open source Headless CMS that I used as a gym for learning ASP.NET Core best practice. Few words about myself. I am a track lover. I work as CTO, and in spare time, in most of my time, I play with open source and I create very cool tool using Microsoft technologies. And that's why I'm here today. Just to keep in touch, I left you some links to connect with me using social network like Medium or LinkedIn or so on. But just go on the presentation. The agenda is very challenging, and the first part of this presentation is about the change of mindset we had in most of company from open source to open-minded. That's why now open source is embraced by bigger corporations. Then is just few words about my gym, about the project I created and what I have used as a sandbox for learning a lot of interesting things that we can spend on the enterprise applications. And finally, we will focus on the best practice that we learn on each application. Well, we are through the first part of the presentation, the change on mindset from open source to open mind. What happened? It was 2006. I was moving my first steps on the development world, so I meet the open source world, and that context we are speaking about 15 years ago. Open source was seen as an unsuccessful business model because you produce software, you create some intellectual property, and you sell it for free to everybody. So it was strange for people that didn't know open source model, think that this business model could be useful for companies. And it was probably because of some form of ignorance, because open source was something new and companies didn't know what are their benefits. So it was a period where a lot of person was a little bit ignorant about open source. And finally, the common talk about open source is that open source is something that was for losers. But I feel the opposite. I was already on the trend that bring open source in this company and tell us that open source is profitable. So I invest a lot of time on developing the open source C# project in 2006. And my first experience was RawCMS. That was an IDE for CSS. It sounds very strange nowadays to spend time on creating an IDE for using CSS, but at that time, no official IDE support the syntax light or or some wizard to help people that didn't know CSS syntax to use it. So it was quite a success. It was a very challenging project because I could start comparing with others and doing something that was shared between people and use it. And it was very big rewarding project. I didn't get any money from this, but I learned a lot of knowledge, and it was ethical. So what I've done is to keep joining the open source trend as learning gym, and I never stopped, and I'm here today to speak about my last project that took my last 2 years, where I test a lot of cool feature of ASP.NET Core, and I learned a lot of interesting feature or solution that I can spend every day on my daily work for enterprises project. The project is called RawCMS, and in fact it is a headless low-code platform CMS. But what is an headless low-code platform CMS? It's something like what we see in this diagram. Developer just logging into a browser without an IDE is able to create an API backend without any deep knowledge of programming. So basically, you just open the browser and start with Visual Tool to create some API. We have to create data definition just by clicking some button. We can introduce business logic, we can use Oak, we can write small snippet of code inside the application itself, and we can start some background jobs to manipulate data, nightly or something like that. And every data are exposed by using API, GraphQL API, and this API can be consumed by each kind of application, from a SysArt client or a SPA application like Angular or React or Vue.js, or a mobile phone application, a Java application, everything you want. So this is very, very interesting project because it helped to reduce the effort on developing API. It reduces boring things like create a crude application or something like that, because every things that can be automated is automated, and reduce human error and short the time to market. So everything will be easier without writing tons of unuseful code, and you can focus just on the business logic or just on the few things you really need. And the main focus on RawCMS is help people to do more with less. You don't believe me? Just 1 minute demo time, just to show you what I tell you. Just time to pick the right just 1 minute to pick the right window. Okay, I'm here. As you see, there is one UI application. Here we can match standard stuff like user and access and role, profile, everything you image from a classic application. But moreover, you can define entities. You can define your entities like fact or address or products or books. An example we have here, books definition, when you can add as many fields you want. For each field, you can define the type, and this list of type can be extended using plugin and so on. So you can define that this field is integer, and then because if it's integer, you can add many special options for the field, like in this case the validity range or so on. So doing that, you can define all the data model, you can define relationship, because you can go here and just tell that there is a relation, and this relation is between this object and another object. So you can map any kind of relation data. And moreover, you can use a Nuke system to create business logic. Like in this case, we have linked the pre-save action to this script that just compute this URL, mixing the ESBN code, and it get the preview URL from a website that give us possibility to read books and fill the fields. This is quite interesting because you can go here and just write code without an IDE, or the front-end team can go here and check what is the business logic. So it is very easy, and everything we set here is just a JSON configuration file that can be easily moved from one environment to another one. Moreover, we have also a graphical interface to see what data are inside the system. So we can just go here, see what are the book. We can create query here using JSON syntax, and we can also create an entity. Like in this case, we are going to insert file like book. I hope you like the book and the movie too. And this is the author, this is the title, this is the category, my description. And finally, we can add here the ISBN. And as I am going to save, the code we have seen before is triggered and the true URL is computed. And now we should see that after the save, this URL is computed. And if I see here, no trick, I see the book. So with just few clicks, I create some data entry and some small business logic that use external services. It was very quick and easy to understand from everybody in the team. And moreover, I can create lambdas, and lambdas is very similar to the AWS or Azure function. The content is that I can write a fragment of code, and this code will be executed when this URL will be hit. So I can create also custom endpoints, and this code can be executed also with a schedulation, so it can run on background using some background engine. So any need you can have on a business context can be satisfied by this tool without using an ADA or more complex things. And moreover, every data you have inside are queryable using just GraphQL. So I can select, sorry for the zoom, I can select here the field I want to show, and that's the field I selected. I can do more deep dive in data, just selecting only one book, maybe something like that, and I see, sorry, just a mistake on the field name, and I see here the right book. So that's what is RawCMS, and I think you can understand the complexity of the platform, and this complexity is managed by some solution that can be brought to your everyday experience, and that's why I'm here today to present this result. So we can go back to the presentation and go on with other stuff on the queue. First, we are on best practice section. So we are going to see the most important best practice we can learn from this project. And first one is about plugin. And plugin is the capability for your application to be extended by some deployable artifact, and that's what we created on RawCMS. So we have a marketplace, and we have a standalone application. That's the one you see before. In this standalone application, we have many modules that can be downloaded from the marketplace and installed. Each module is composed by one API part, so one backend part and one UI part. And so each module is self-contained that can be installed. That's a very, very huge system that let us scale on the functional dimension. But how it? But why we done that? In the microservice area, you should talk that you can just activate one container with one application. That's the way to scale, and that's true in most cases. But there are some cases, like if you are managing old code very old code base where you need to segment some segmentation on the new feature, an example, or if you are working background job, we are see that point later, or if you have very tightly coded business logic, so you cannot switch to a real microservices architecture, or like in the case of RawCMS, you are working with on-premise products. So in that case, plugin is still needed, and that's how we implemented it in RawCMS. So we have the host application that's think like a stupid ASP.NET application, and we have the dependency injection container that is shared with the plugin, so that each plugin can expose some classes, and each plugin is self-contained, so there is no cross-talking between plugin, and each plugin can define which classes are exposed and which not exposed. And this makes the system more robust to library difference of library version, dependency, and so on. So this configuration is the one that can you scale on using plugin, keeping in mind security and quality stuff. While second point is very interesting point is about AOP. In this slide there is the Wikipedia definition, and personally I don't like any complex definition, so I try to summarize what AOP is in just a few words, and in simple word, AOP is make things happen without writing code. So just go on this using an example. In the left you see a traditional piece of code where we have a stopwatch to measure the code execution, where we have some logging that are conditional to avoid losing performance, an example, and only one row code, the one you find in the right. So with IOP you can just write the code on the right and get the same output of the code on the left. So basically it's very interesting because we avoid all repetitive stuff, but we can also do more. This is another example where I'm not introducing a behavior by design, but I use the same engine of IOP to reduce a lot of code. As you see in the example in the left, we have to create a new repository, get an instance from the IE, and then we have to use it. But the only part of business logic I have here is inside the string that I use as query, so I can implement everything using IOP like in the right part. So it is very interesting because you can short code and can be useful. How it is possible? This is possible using the process dispatcher. That's a class in the standard framework, and it is very powerful because in this example with just 20 lines of code, maybe less if you just consider the invoke method, I can inspect the class and see what is the method I'm going to call, see if this is implemented or not, and I can switch and can change execution, or I can write code before and after the execution itself. So basically that's what allow me to implement this feature. Mike talked about AOP in C#. If you're looking something like automatic logging or automatic method measuring is perfect, using also framework like Autoflag that give us this feature by design. But if you need something for doing stuff like switching method or doing things by design. We have to say that we are not on Java Spring, so the support we have natively is very limited, and creating something by yourself probably is not the way to maintain an enterprise system. So if you don't want to switch on paid system like Post Sharp, probably you have to learn better patterns and use traditional programming. Okay, well, then next step is about background job. Nowadays, no user are patient to wait when are using an application or using a website. So in 2020, most scenarios are asynchronous by design. So the user clicks something and something happens in background, and you get notified by a push notification or something like that. So we have to handle background works, and these background works need to be near the application itself, because it's activated by the application, and it sounds like something that works inside our microservices or our web API application. And in fact, we fall in this three scenario. The right one is the simple, because we have a monolith, and in the monolith, everything is inside the monolith. So there is no issue to locate the right place for the background job. So in this case, it is an embedded background job server inside the application. Using microservices or mini services, we have basically we have many little monoliths. So it is still the same things. Using microservices, instead we can talk to remove each part that is not related with the domain application. But also in this case, because we have to activate a job that's outside our application domain, we need some API call, and some API call need an API application on the backend and a background job inside the API backend application. And in this case, we can use plugin to extend the set of jobs that are running and available for the user. So in this scenario, we need a background system. What is the choice? The one option is the one on the left. So using native solution basically asks you to implement a services and just implement a class. You see very small in this feature, but it's not that the matter. You just have to think that there is a class to implement. Very easy, but very poor in terms of solution, because it can be used probably if you want to run a background job once or something like that. If you need some more strong, you need many feature like automation, like authentication, like a dashboard, like the possibility to run again the job, see what is going to run, and some control over backgrounds. You need complete scheduling solution like Amfire. Amfire have all the features I mentioned so far, and it is very easy to configure. So just go to the demo, and it is very easy to see how we can configure it, because we have just to add one or two rows on the startup file, and this enable just 1 minute to pick the right tool. I can do that. Okay, perfect. It's running. Maybe the application is not running. But okay. It wasn't running, so that's why we don't see anything. Okay, perfect. So Oh, nice. We see now the graph that see what happened in real time. We see the history of job was used. We see that we are working only on my PC because the system can be balanced to many workers. And we see the job list. We have only one job, this stupid job, and this we can requeue the job. This is processing, and this is now succeeded. We can requeue job again just to see that in the dashboard there's something happen, and everything is just driven by this line of code, and this part that enqueue the job or can schedule the job at specific date or time, and the job itself can be a class like in this case, method like this case, or can be a class implementation. So it is very easy to manage, and it gives us a lot of value. So then next step is about identity. Nowadays we have to manage very efficiently the user, because we have microservices, we have a lot of vertical application in an enterprise, so each application must talk together. We cannot fall in situation like the one of Polyphemus, when Odysseus in the Odyssey trick by telling nobody. We cannot have any user that is nobody. In 2020, we cannot insert the password twice. We cannot have different application for different user for different application in the same organization, and you cannot let application to act on your behalf using service account, and more important, you cannot implement an identity solution by yourself. So keeping in mind this, we can see what we can do in each company, also in small cases, to avoid bad situation. We can start from the general architecture, the one we like, where we have an IDS like ADFS or Keycloak or Auth0, everything you need to implement an auto authentication. We have resource servers that are basically on single sign-on and are consumed by how many applications you want, isolated by scopes. But what we can do if we start in simple application, we can just use a standalone backend application where we have API and the identity server installed on itself, so it can expose OAuth application or OAuth API and consume the same API. So in the future, if you want to scale, you can just remove the part that give you also the identity server provider, and then you can federate to system and reach the target configuration without touching other part of application itself. And that's how RawCMS works, because RawCMS has the possibility to work as a standalone identity server provider, exposing you out to services, so can be used in that way, or can federate to other systems. So this can easily let you switch from the simple situation to the complex one, and we can evolve without too much issues. And how much complicated is it? Left part is the one where we act just as federation. The right part is the one when we act as standalone. So we have the authentication, the identity server part, and the authentication part. Just few lines more to use all of the two configurations. So it's very easy to manage this shit. Next point is about the usage of multiple database, and this is a very strange request from me to ask you on using multiple database for storing data, because we always say, every software architect tell us that each data must be in just one place. We have to know a single source of truth. We have to know we don't have to replicate data. We have to consume data in live, not using data transfer and so on. But there is a matter. The matter is that nowadays applications are very, very challenging, and we need performance. We need many rich features, and often traditional database is not enough to solve all that request, but neither are NoSQL database is enough to solve all that that request. So the idea is to pick the best from each tool. Maybe you want to use a traditional database for have your relational part of the architecture, but for the log table that is very, very, very huge, you want to use a NoSQL solution, maybe. So we have to, what we have to do is to use multiple databases to get the best from each one. And what I say is that if you want to fire against tanks, you don't need a Swiss army, you need the whole army. So we need each tool the market give us, and then we can pick the best from each one, but we have another issue. The issue is about how we can let all these databases work together, because we don't want that data are not synced. Data must be consistent. The must is that this synchronization is automatic and is in real time or near real time. And if we want to manage it on the C# level, on the code level, we can use the regular hook we have on Hibernate or Entity Framework that let inform us when something's changed, and we can propagate the change to other databases. And another solution is to use event sourcing, and maybe using event sourcing and MongoDB is a good solution, because MongoDB just notifies us when something changes on the database. And the solution are multiple, but it's important that the solution is automated. And in this piece of code is how we manage it on RawCMS, because we have databases, the one you see in the demo, but we have also a full text engine. Maybe you want to look into the text description of the books to get the books that is like one keyword or something like that. And this is done by using Elasticsearch. There is one hook, one special hook. This is called the full text lambda. And this hook, with this 2 line of code, probably just replicate and update if exists the data on Elasticsearch. So we keep data aligned, and we can have the cool feature of Elasticsearch for the text engine, and the cool feature of Mongo databases for all the other part of the data management. Then another interesting point is about multitenancy. Like very much this point. So multitenancy is the capabilities of one application to manage data of the customer in an isolated way. So we can have multiple organization or multiple user. Each user or organization have different data, and this data is isolated. This can be done in many levels. So we can isolate rows just by adding an ID, or we can isolate table with different name or databases or server. For GDPR compliance and for many simplicity reason, the most easy way to do that is just embed one database for each user or organization, depending on what is your tenant dimension. And this is useful if you are developing a product like a CS product, or if you want to create a core version of your enterprise application that can be used by many customers, or just even if it is deployed in many customers, can be tunneled by the customer itself. This seems very challenging, but it's very, very easy to implement. And how to implement that? Also in this case, dependency injection is our friend, so it is very easy to do that. We have just handmade implementation where in maybe 10 lines of code we do the job. We just add a scoped service that is the Mongo database, and in the factory, that is the factory give you an instance, and because the service is scoped, this instance is computed each request of the user. So we compute each time this value, and each time we give the right database based on the URL you are navigating. Of course, you can expect the token, you can get the ID of the user from the token, you can get the roles from the token, you can do everything you want in this 10 line of code. And as you see in the right there, it is very, very transparent for the user. Before switching to the complex solution, I would to let you see this part in action. This is the multi-tenant example. I ran it this time before navigating the URL, and as you see here, we get the host name of the application, and we use two different host name, and these two host name are mapped on my localhost, and we create a Mongo client based on the right tenant name. Then we have an endpoint here in the controller part, and this controller just generates fake data, creating a table if the table is not present on databases, and just output the data. So very, very, very stupid. Now I suppose everything is running. We can see here, not Rick. I can also refresh. There is no databases. So database is empty. I can come back to this. So this piece of code is heated because the service is scoped. So I'm computing the value, and in that case, the tenant name is test site because test site is the host name. So I can just continue this, and here I see all the data I created, and as I promised, the database and the table was created at runtime, and we have this. And of course, if I hit another URL, I get the same result, but with a different databases. So we hit again this part, and we compute a different set name, and we get different data stored, as you see here, as the last proof, as you see here, different database name and different data. So you can scale how many times you want on this one code base and multiple user data isolated, so you have to forget about query by user or by query ID and mix data from one user to another. So very, very cool solution and simple to implement. Of course, doing that manually like I've done is not clever. It's not clever, of course, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can use Autofact, and it is very simple to configure. Autofact can be used in regular ASP.NET framework and in the core version of the framework. You just have to implement one classes where you need only to output the tenant ID, and then you can map the tenant name with a set of services that override the base services you created. So you can do more than just switch database, but you can also change the behavior just adding services in the dependency injection container and switch services based on the tenant. Well, last point about microservices, and we are done. Microservices, of course, you will know what is microservices, and also you will know that it's not always so easy to implement a microservice architecture. And microservice architecture is something like a chimera is, and this photo is shows the chimera. That's an artwork from my town. It's a mythologic figure where a lion and a snake and a goat are together, and this figure is cannot be found in the real world, and microservices are something like that, because it's very hard to find it in the real world, because everything do microservices, but there are no check about is microservice or not, and often the guidelines are not so clear. But why it's so hard to create microservice architecture? The size of microservices depend on the domain. If we have a big domain or big logic, we have very big one very big application that's not so micro, and that's an issue. We can fall in situation when the isolation of domain is not done so good, so we have a lot of application that insist on the same domain application. So we physically have microservices, but logically we have just one distributed monolith, and this is not so good. And we can also fall in situation when we have 1,000 microservices and one custom library we created for reusing code, and if you change this library each day, of course you will need to redeploy all the microservices in the stack. So also in these cases we can fall in suboptimal situation. And my suggestion about this is that you have to focus on microservices, but not so much. So microservices is a way to build a stable and scalable architecture, but you have to start with a good analysis, use container always, and have a very standard architecture with identity server, job server, and well-defined role from application and so on. This will make that microservices will happen naturally. Well, all done. What to take home from this session? The first one, the one I love, is about open source. Open source is not for loser. Open source is a way to become a better programming, is something that can accelerate your career, and working in challenging projects like RawCMS make you grow as programmer, because push you to a next level, and it's very funny, on my opinion. And looking to ASP.NET Core or Microsoft ASP.NET Core world, we see that lot of optional stuff are now included in the package, so we can do very huge things without reinvent the wheel. So basically, thank you for listening. Thank you and bye.